Welcome back to Home Theater Gurus. This is episode 26. So a lot of times whenever I'm thinking of what the next episode is going to be, I do listen to user feedback or subscriber feedback. You leave your comments or you're requesting a video on a certain topic. Now sometimes I can't get to it because maybe it's not something that everyone's going to want to see, only maybe a few people, so I have to kind of look at that too. But if it's something that's important, I'm really going to try to cover it, and this is one of those episodes. So this episode we're going to be covering something I really should have covered in episode 7, but we're going to go over main and sub integration. Now in episode 7, we aligned all of our subs using RumiQ Wizard and a mini DSP to do our delay adjustments, and then use the mini DSP with REW to EQ them. But then after that, when it came to the sub to main integration, it was kind of short and sweet, didn't really get into it much. Now that episode was probably 20 hours of videoing and editing, it's an hour and a half episode, and I had to watch it several times, adding, little pictures and all kind of different text and all kind of stuff to it. So it was a really intense episode to make. So there wasn't really enough room for me to add anything to it. And so now we're going to get into this right here, which is kind of going to top that off. Episode 7 and episode 8, those kind of go together. This will kind of be a continuation of those episodes, and it's going to answer a question a lot of you have had after watching that episode: is what about the main to sub integration? So as a lot of you now realize, because you've been keeping up with the channel and everything we've been covering, your receivers in your auto setup programs are really limited in how accurate they are and what they can do. When it comes to setting up subwoofers, even single subwoofers, they can't fix, dips and nulls or placement issues. They're very limited. They're not going to let you know whenever you've got a poor placement issue. They can't really align, subs to mains. It's hit or miss. Sometimes they get it right, a lot of times they get it wrong. It's one of those things you should verify. So there's a lot of things where we're going to have to get our feet wet if we really want to get our system set up properly. We can't just rely on electronics to fix it for us. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Now, main to sub integration. In case you're not sure exactly what that is, whenever we set a speaker to small, that's, we're telling that speaker that we're going to roll it off to a subwoofer at our desired, the crossover point we selected. Now, as we know, we really don't want that crossover point to be below 80 Hertz. It has nothing to do with how our mains perform, but it has to do with modal responses in our room, and we want that good consistency to seat response. We want everyone to hear the same thing. And that's why we choose no lower than 80 Hertz if at all possible. So the main to sub integration is how well our mains are aligned to the subs. We have to get the mains and subs aligned just like we did the subs, getting subs aligned to each other. We had to go in there and adjust delay to get our subs aligned so we didn't have negative summation. We wanted the most positive summation we could get, so that way all the subs were helping each other and not hurting each other, and we were getting the performance we paid for, basically. So the same thing happens with the sub to the main, and the reason is because you're taking two speakers and you're forcing them to play some of those frequencies together, as they're crossing over. Well, heck, let's go ahead and draw it on the board real quick. All right, here is our main. All right, and we're going to let's use blue for our sub. Here's our sub, and we're going to call this 80 Hertz. Okay, so that's 80 Hertz. That's our crossover point we selected. So as you see, the receiver is forcing slopes on both speakers. This is our sub system. This could have 15 subs in it. It could have 2. We don't know. The receiver doesn't know. The receiver sees a virtual sub. It sees one singular sub response. This is our sub response with an 80 Hertz crossover applied to it. Now it's going to start sloping off, like half an octave lower than 80 Hertz. And the same thing is going to happen over here to the main. It's going to start dropping it too, because it knows 80 Hertz is our crossover point that we've set. So it has to get those two falling together so that then when they're summed, we'll get a nice even response across them that hopefully looks like this. Nice and smooth. We don't want a dip right there. We don't want nulls. We don't want any crazy peaks. We don't want anything crazy happening left or right. that is ideal. That's what the goal is. So we know our subs, they're all perfectly aligned. I mean, like I said in episode 7, once they're done and you've got them, well aligned and EQ'd, you're done. You're not going to touch them. And, that stays the same. We're not going to mess with our sub alignment. That would be a really bad idea and work too hard to get the subs looking the way they do and to get that nice seat-to-seat response. And then, our mains over here, you go in your receiver and, you set up your sound levels like we did, setting it for reference on the last episode. And you've got your distance, if you're 11 feet away, that's going to be right. So, you can take a tape measure and in your receiver under distances, your mains, if you're 11 feet away, it's going to say 11 feet and that's accurate. The subs are going to say something else. The subs, especially if you got multiple subs, the distance could be 7 feet. It could be, 18 feet. You could have one sub that you're 6 feet from, but it might say 12 feet. The reason is because it's not a physical distance. And you have to kind of get over that when it comes to subs. And remember, it's not a physical distance. It is a time alignment to the mains. So the distance for the subs, it's going to be whatever it is to get this right here at this crossover point. It's going to be whatever it took to get a nice, positive, smooth transition from sub to mains. And what I mean by that is, if you think about episode 7 was all about delay, changing delays to align our subs. So we're also going to use delay to align our subs to our mains, and we're going to do that in our receiver. We're going to go into the same setting or the same menu that you see all the distances for all your speakers, and you're going to be adjusting the sub distance. And when you adjust the sub distance, you're adjusting the delay to get a nice positive transition across the crossover point. And that's all it is. It's actually really, really easy. If you've got Room EQ Wizard, like we did in episode 7, hopefully you have a mic, like a UMic 1 or Dayton has some mics. Hopefully you have something where you can use Room EQ Wizard and do this. If you can't, we're going to go over another method in a minute, so you're not left in the dark. There's another option. But it's not going to be as good as Room EQ Wizard, but I'm not going to leave y'all hanging. Alright guys, so before we start, I want to give a special thanks to Eaton Altman and Wayne Pomposa. Both of those guys, I hope I didn't butcher y'all's names. I'm friends with both of those guys over Facebook. Me and Wayne are actually really good friends. I taught him how to do this and he's gotten so good at it now. He's teaching other people and actually started designing home theaters. And some of the stuff he can do like virtually is some of the best looking home theaters I've ever seen. But anyway, they've both given me some REW measurements that show this, and some responses that we can look at here, because they know that I just moved and everything, so my setup isn't done. I would like to do this in real time and show you on the computer screen while I do this and take measurements, but I'm just not set up for it. So they've agreed to let me use some of their pictures or their responses. Alright, so the first one we're going to look at is actually one I did a long time ago. Now this one has a 60 hertz crossover, which we know is not something we want to do, but it's a very good example. And also the sub response could be better. This was just me playing around. This was after Odyssey. And or at least one of the responses was after Odyssey. Now, like I said, Odyssey sometimes gets it wrong. And this is a very good example. If you look right here, Odyssey has a large peak. A lot of times you think that summation is not good or that the transition's not good. You're going to have dips and nulls, and usually you will. But here's evidence that you can also get a peak. Some of you may have heard that you want to align your sub to mains using an SPL meter at your crossover point, which let's say 80 hertz, and you're going to adjust sub distance till you get max output. Well, that's what you get. This is not what you want. You do not want this. You got a 10 dB peak, in that large area at the crossover point, so that's incorrect. And this is what Odyssey set up. This particular time that I did this measurement, something didn't sound right, so I got out Room EQ Wizard and checked it out, and this is what I found. So of course I needed to find the correct distance for my subs to get them aligned to the mains. So you go into your AVR, your pre-pro menu, and you're going to go find your distances. Okay, they're different menus. They're going to be set up a little bit different from Yamaha to Denon, Marantz. But anyway, they're all the same. So you're going to go find the distances, and you're going to go to sub distance, and you're going to change it. Just change it a foot. If you look right here, I also found a null. Now I smoothed this response, so it's going to be a little bit easier to see than some of the ones we're fixing to look at in a minute. But you see that yellow has a big dropout. This is also out of phase. Now this is only a few feet, like 4 or 5 feet difference than the one that Odyssey did. So, you know, every foot in that sub distance is going to make quite a bit of difference. Now I do want to emphasize with Denon and Marantz, when you set the sub distance, back out of the menu one time. If you don't do that, you're going to take your response measurement, it's going to look the same because it didn't load the new distance setting. So anyway, but then you see here I have some red responses. Now that's 1 foot apart on each one. That was just me looking at them, trying to find the one that looks best. Now of course those, we have a nice transition across that crossover point, so that's what I chose. We have to be aware that auto systems make mistakes, so we need to know how to go back in there and correct them and to verify they're right. They don't always get it wrong, but we need to know what to look for to make sure they're not getting it wrong. Now here's one from Eaton. You see here how just changing that sub distance is changing that crossover point drastically. And of course the green response here is where he has them, you know, a nice transition across the crossover point. All right, now here's my buddy Wayne. As you see, his sub response is extremely good. Like I said, I taught him how to do it, but he took off. I mean, we used to do this stuff over private messenger on Facebook, and he by far is the fastest learner I've ever had. He picked it up like that, and I mean, you can imagine you guys have done it, watching me do it on episode 7. He picked up on it so fast. I really think he was born to do this stuff. So we actually measured the main and sub individually with the crossover engaged, because that's actually what you're going to be seeing. You know, that's the response we're going to be working with, that, you know, those slopes are going to be engaged on the sub and main. So he measured them individually, and then he's going to combine them and get the other measurement. Then you can see his red response where he actually has them combined together. Now you could have negative summation on the sub side too. It can be on either side. Anywhere along here you could have issues if they're not aligned. You could even have maximum output or good output right here at the crossover, but negative summation that you've caused on either side, so they're still not right. Now Wayne's getting responses of just the sub and just the main. So, you know, if you're not using ASIO for all, which we didn't do on episode 7 because of the issues it has, and, you know, it's got some issues getting set up and a lot of people have problems with it, so we just went another route that was much easier. If you need to know how to get a response measurement of your sub system by itself, just go ahead, cross it over to your mains at 80 Hertz or whatever you're going to use for your crossover point, disconnect the main, okay, then play a sweep of that main, and of course all you're going to get is the sub. Then plug it back up, hook up your main, unhook the sub, and do it the same sweep, and this time all you're going to get is the main. So now you've got your two responses. You've got this response and that response, and then you can see what they look like combined. Now of course you can just go in there and take a bunch of measurements and get the one that looks better and not do these two, but it does help to have a starting point and see what they look like before you combine them. So again, a poor summation or a poor transition from sub to main, you could have a dip over here. You know, it doesn't have to be at 80 Hertz wherever your crossover point is. It could be left or right of that. So, you know, if you see anything like that, that's going to be a, you know, ding, 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 that you need to go in there and do some adjustments and work on that sub distance because you've got some alignment issues. And also, you know, you're going to notice weak base. You know, if you've got a big dip right here, and especially, you know, your subs are good. You know, you aligned them and you know darn well that you've got a good sub response, and you know, you run Odyssey or WiPo and something's sounding very, very weak, you know, or the bass isn't sounding full. This is something you need to check into. Of course, it's not going to matter with the LFE because it has its own material that's just, you know, dedicated for the sub channel. But anything crossed over, anything set to small, this is where you're going to be losing output, you know, if you've got a big null or a big dip because that distance is not set right. So that could key you in that something's not right and you may want to check this out. I would check it out anyway, especially if you're already, you know, what you should be using RumiQ Wizard or our method that we used with the RTA measurement in your phone app, which we're fixing to go over. You know, if you did align your subs that way, you can also use a very similar method to check for this too. Before you get to that, I just want to talk about something real quick. During the week, or actually last week, a guy sent me his sub response. His sub response was perfect. Looked really, really good. Did a really great job. You know, he did episode 7, went through there step by step. Really, really nice job. But he sent me a picture of a REW response where he had his main to sub integrated, and he had a big dip at like 80 hertz. No, it's 75 hertz. He had a big dip at 75 hertz. That's what it was. So, but he said when I did my subs, when I had my crossover raised up, it looked great. So first, I explained to him how to do this right here. Go in there and check your sub distance. Move it up and down a little bit, just see if you can fix it. He couldn't fix it. It wouldn't go away. So I told him, go in your receiver and set the receiver to large for your mains. Let's see what the main looks like. He ran a sweep of the mains, and sure enough, that 75 hertz null was in his mains. Now, again, the crossover point was 80, but this was his main, and there was a big null right here and was pulling down the entire response even when they were summed. So I had him go in there and adjust his crossover point from 80, and I think it went to 100 hertz. Now, he had 2 subs up front. So at 100 hertz, some people are going to say, well, that's audible. Remember, LFE goes up to 120 hertz, okay? You're going to have content that's possibly in there up to 120, and his subs are up front. So, whether it was audible, he couldn't tell at his seat, but his subs are up front. So even though he's getting to the point to where a lot of people are saying, well, I can kind of start to hear where the bass is coming from those subs, they're up front. So it doesn't matter. You're not going to know it. But anyway, he bumped it up to 100 and it completely fixed the null. So now, where before maybe he had SBIR problems, he had some ceiling bounce, some of that we haven't gone over yet. But, by bumping that crossover point up, he doesn't have to worry about it. So he doesn't have to go through the trouble of trying to fix those issues with room acoustics. He completely avoided them and fixed them by just raising his crossover point up. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about, how to do this if you do not have Room EQ Wizard. Again, I recommend you all get it. Room EQ Wizard is free. Now, UMIC 1 is $100. So a little backstory. I already did this video. I did this video a week ago, okay? But there is episode 10, where we use an RTA app on your phone, and I have another video with a sweep that I made the sweep in Room EQ Wizard. I can make a file and make a sweep, and I think I made it from like 20 to 120 hertz or something like that, just to get the subs aligned and to find good sub spots in your room. And that one was basically an episode on a replacement for subcrawl, because the subcrawl is basically a worthless method that you have better luck winning the lotto than getting everything aligned and set up and placed properly. And if you ever paid someone to come in your house and set up your system and they were crawling on the floor to place your subs, I recommend you to quickly show them the door, because they are not trained. But we don't know what we don't know, and so everyone's got to start somewhere. So on the video I did last week, I told you can use those sweeps in that RTA measurement to see this, which you can. But it only goes up to 110 or 120 hertz, whatever I made the sweep to. So you could have issues out here that you won't see. And on Facebook, we were talking about it, and Eaton actually had a great idea. He's like, you should make another file that goes up further to see those issues. And that's why I didn't make this, or didn't finish this video and edit it, and why you haven't seen it yet. It's because, that was a great idea. And when I start thinking about it, I don't want to put something out that I could have made better. And also I wanted to put some more examples, and he gave me some examples, and so did Wayne, so you could actually see some Room EQ Wizard responses. But anyway, so that's what we're going to do. So that's why I'm shooting this again. It's all Eaton's fault. But I'm really glad that he suggested that. It was a great suggestion. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, and you do not have Room EQ Wizard, or you're not using Room EQ Wizard with a UMIC 1 or some type of measurement mic that's calibrated, I suggest you go watch episode 10, because your subs probably need help too if you're not using a UMIC 1 to set stuff up in REW. You go watch that video so you kind of understand what's going on. Here's a little video of the response, and as you can see with your phone app right here, this is actually a video of the phone app, at where I'm sitting at my listening position, and you can see the response of the subwoofer. And it's going to show you where the, basically it's going to give you the response. If you see a big dip, you've got some issues. I'm going to make another video. What is this, episode 26? I'm going to call it episode 26.1. It's going to be nothing but that sweep. And down in the description, I'll put the app I use for Android. It's a real-time analyzer called an RTA app. It's one that has really good resolution, and if you're using your phone app and you play this 26.1 video that I'm gonna make, which is nothing but sweeps, and you sit at your chair, it's gonna be playing. I'll probably make it play out of the right, main. You're gonna be able to see this transition, and you're gonna see if you have any major issues around the crossover point. And if you do, if you see a big dip right here, go into your sub distance, write down where it's at right now. And that's going to be, wherever, your room correction set it up. Hopefully you didn't set it up. Hopefully you didn't go in there and measure all your speakers and set them at the right distance, which that's okay. But hopefully you didn't also measure the sub and put its distance, because if you did that, guarantee you're going to have some major issues right here. But anyway, write down where it's at, especially if auto correction did it, and then go and see if you can make it better. Keep in mind, you may have a stellar sub response, set up and EQ'd perfectly, but above the subs where we're working again with one source of modal, one modal source, we're going to have issues again. So it's not going to be as pretty as your sub. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we do not want to add any negative summation because our sub distance is off. We don't want to mess up anything. We want it as good as we can possibly get it. Alright guys, so don't forget to look down in the description. I'm going to put, any links for any of this stuff, that I think is important that you may be looking for or you need to find. It's going to be down there. And if you have anything you want to see in an upcoming episode, let me know. I know a lot of you have asked for stuff, and some of it I've forgotten. We've been moving, had a lot going on, so just, ask me what, let me know what you want to see, what you want me to cover next. I'm kind of wanting to get into subwoofers and subwoofer design using WinISD. That's something that I really enjoy, and it's something that anyone can do. You just have to know how. Just like all this stuff, you just have to know how to do it. It's not nearly as hard as a lot of people think. So I kind of want to get into that. I don't know if that's something that you guys want to really get into, but I would like to, design a sub, something that's not so huge that, will fit in a normal sized living room that's going to perform excellent, and, we'll even do a cut sheet for it. Heck, I'll probably even name it. But anyway, that's something that I'm looking forward to. Another one that's been requested that I really want to do is using the Odyssey Editor app. A lot of people are really confused on how to use that and how to use it properly. So I want to get into that. I need to get into house curves, not of the subs really, but of an entire frequency response, all the way up to 20,000 hertz, and how, sound naturally moves through the air, because we don't want to change, we want to have a natural sound. So there's a lot I really need to cover. So if any of you guys, can think of any more, I'm going to start making a list and, compiling a list, and we can start knocking them out. That's going to be it for this one, guys. I will see y'all for the next one.